morning. This is Emma from the Daisy Chain podcast. I'm here with Stephanie Kelly from Personal Farewells. Steph is the owner and operator of Personal Farewells, who are independent funeral services. Thank you for joining me, Steph.
Thanks, Emma.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Finally, it stopped raining, so
yes.
Everyone seems a little happier today.
See the sun. It's a nice change.
I know, it's beautiful. So we're going to talk today about a subject that people tend to avoid talking about, and we're going to delve a little more into that. Basically, the topic of our chat today is talking about death won't kill you, which I think is a great way to talk about that subject. Just before we get into that topic, are you able to give me a little bit of your background, where you're from, a little bit of personal information?
Yeah, of course. So Emma, I am located in the Sutherland Shire. I'm a mum of 2 young girls. And how did I get into this industry is a question that I actually get asked all the time, especially as I am a younger person, and predominantly the industry is renowned for having mature persons in the roles. And I feel that with my customer service background that I've had since leaving school, and having a great interest in helping people, supporting people in various roles throughout my life, I kind of just fell into this industry. Having lost a grandparent and being involved in that process really opened my eyes to what the funeral industry was all about. And I saw lots of gaps. I saw areas that many people can be taken for granted for during this time of need. And in particular, the financial component, which some people just regard as it's a given, it's a funeral service, it costs lots of money, but that's actually not the case. And when we started up just over 5 years ago, there wasn't much transparency in regards to pricing. And this is one factor, along with our customer service elements that we're really proud to support families with along the way, is that we had transparent pricing. And that was our online funeral planner with instant quote. And since that actually came about, Fair Trading has actually stepped in and told all funeral directors that they should be having transparent pricing on their websites instead of having to make that phone call, which can be really daunting for a family, especially during that time of need. So that's who we are, and that's how I got to where we are. And
wow, that's a great change to be implemented from a step that you took because you felt that was the right thing to do. So yeah, congratulations for that. I love how we've kind of connected, and our motivation for doing what we do is actually quite similar, being that it's kind of our experience with a grandparent in our particular field that kind of was what pushed us towards what we do initially. And I love it when you connect with people that you didn't know before, and there's all these kind of similarities that pop up. So we're very excited to work with you as well. So we're going to talk about, as I said, the topic is talking about death won't kill you. I guess that is a common thing in a lot of our podcast interviews. We're talking about the things that people don't want to talk about, don't feel comfortable talking about, but they're actually the things that we need to be talking about and will actually bring about change. And look, there's reasons that people don't like to talk about death. It's a very sensitive subject, but it's something that we are all going to experience personally, and we're all going to lose people along the journey of our lives. So I guess I'm not going to ask you specific questions to start with. They'll probably pop up as we go. But what is it about talking about death that people avoid?
I think it's the unknown. I feel as humans, we like to be in control of our lives. I think that's quite a normal human reaction. And I feel that we don't really know what happens after death. People with religious beliefs may have, certain understandings of what they feel may happen next, but essentially it is unknown. And I think that scares people.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's similar to, talking about dementia or talking about the loss of a baby or, having miscarriage. It's those, those subjects that just get avoided. And then they snowball because they become bigger. And then it's even harder to talk about. So have you got some tips on how we talk about death, whether that's, I mean, I guess you've got young children, I've got children, we lost a family member a couple of years ago. Are there some tips that you can share on, you know, how to talk about death, whether it's with children or whether it's with adults?
Yeah, that's a good question, Emma. So with regards to adults, the way that it's kind of thinking big picture and looking at maybe world events or things that are happening at the moment. So, for example, we've all experienced the COVID that's happened to everyone over the last 2 years. This has really been an eye-opener for everyone about illness and looking after each other and things like that. I feel that everyday events could almost prompt us into having this conversation. So, for example, we hear that people are getting unwell with an illness. That could then prompt a question about, if that happened to me, what would happen next? You know, what would my wishes be? You know, would it be cremation? Would it be burial? Do I want to be an organ donor? So I guess thinking about what's happening in your life, maybe a loved one has recently passed away, or someone is terminal with an illness. I guess it's during those times that we do start to question our mortality and really wonder, you know, what is it that I want, or what is it that my family's wishes might be for me? Maybe there's something in particular that they would like to share, and having that discussion and opening that conversation is what's so important.
Yeah. How about with children? Is it the same?
Look, I feel it's a little bit different for my children, having grown up with mum being a funeral director. So we are a little bit open about, you know, where are we going? We're going to the office. Are you dropping off ashes today, mum? So, you know, little things like that with my kids might be a little bit more open than the average family. But I think it's important to be mindful of the terminology that you're using with children. So, for example, you know, if grandma has passed and you say that she's gone to sleep forever, that can be hard for children to understand, because they may think that if I go to sleep, or if they go to sleep, they may go to sleep forever as well.
Yeah.
So it's really thinking about the right words and explaining it in an age-appropriate manner. You know, if you're talking to a 5-year-old as opposed to a 12-year-old, you know, you're thinking about what the potential repercussions of that conversation are, so that they also don't become afraid of what happens next.
Yeah. And that's true. I've been into aged care facilities where, you know, I know the names of the residents, and I've said, you know, where's Joan? And one of the staff will go, oh, Joan's gone. And I'm like,
where's she gone?
Gone, like gone? Or, oh no, she's gone out for lunch with her family. And it's like, okay. But then there'll be other occasions where it's, you know, where's June? And she's gone. And I'll be like, where? And they're like, oh no, she passed away last night. I'm like, let's just say it as that initially. Because then you kind of go into no man's land and you're confused, and you actually don't know the right response. And my family the same as yours. You know, I'll come home and the girls will go, how was today? And I'll go, actually, it was, you know, it's quite sad because this particular lady has passed away, or this gentleman has passed away. So yeah, I think our children get a slightly different perspective than a lot of others might, but I'm grateful for that, because I think it's a really important part of learning and growing for kids.
Yes, exactly right. There's lots of stigma attached to words, death, dying, those terms. We generally say past or lost or gone and things like that. And I actually have a very similar example. The other day, I was talking about a staff member who had recently moved to another role, and I said something along the lines of, we lost her to, you know, another company or something, and the person I was talking to almost fell over, thinking that she'd passed away, died, just because it was me that they were talking to. So it can certainly get misinterpreted if you're you know, using it in the wrong context.
Yeah. So when it comes to planning a funeral, Is there advice? I have a funny story about my nan. Well, I think I told you this. There was a scheme in England, this is years ago, where you could go and prepay your funeral and you got stamps because there was no computer records at the time. You got stamps on a chart, and when you made your first payment, you got a free microwave and all these kind of incentives for people to be proactive. And I remember my mum calling me and saying, my nan had been up to the co-op to pay her last payment for her prepaid funeral. And when she came out, and nothing bad happened, but she got hit by a car. And we kind of laughed that, it was ironic that she'd been to make this last payment. But she was probably ahead of her time, especially at the time, for prepaying and taking that pressure off of her children, so that she knew when it was her time that it would all be organised and all be sorted out. Is that something that you think is a good idea, or something that we need to try and incorporate more into our society?
I feel that, step one is really opening the dialogue, to be honest. I feel that we still have a long way to go with talking openly about our wishes, because sometimes if we talk about it, it may happen. I mean, thankfully, your grandmother was okay, but there is this, people are concerned that, if I talk about it, some sort of karmic thing is going to happen in the universe and it's going to bring this about, which certainly isn't the case. It's about kind of just planning ahead, if you will. We plan for many other events in our lives. Death is something that will happen to everyone. And I guess ignoring it means that when the time does arise, it's your family that is the ones who are trying to work out what your wishes may have been or what you would have liked. When, it doesn't have to be quite as strict as, I would like this coloured coffin and this colour flowers and I want to be at this cemetery. It doesn't have to be quite that specific if you don't want. There's some families that have put those types of requests, I guess, in place. And that makes things easier, I guess, moving forward. But just having a conversation about the type of service, these days things are so different. It's not just a choice between the chapel, the local chapel and a church. We have really personalised options at clubs and venues and function halls and outside and on the beach and all different types of things that, can be discussed. Some need some preparation, some need a bit more forethought. And I guess that's what it is opening that conversation.
Yeah. Something popped into my brain then was, when you are having something that's a little bit less traditional, I guess, which will change over time, are there certain things that you need to take into account, like, are there council regulations or government requirements of those kind of things? Does that come into play?
Yeah, exactly. Even things like accessibility to a room can be quite an important factor for us. And there's also some locations that they're just not, maybe it's just the times we're in at the moment, but they're not able to hold a funeral service for whatever reasons. Maybe it's a particular club and they have certain views on holding a funeral service with a casket there.
Yeah.
But then you may also wish to consider a memorial service whereby the cremation component takes place first and then the memorial happens at a later time. So this is also something that's becoming a little bit more popular, especially during COVID times when there were so many restrictions in place regarding attendees. So we've had to, look outside the box and some funeral homes have been doing this for many years, and places overseas have also been doing funerals differently for many years. So it's about adapting to the current situation, looking at the family's requests and just making something as personal as we possibly can to farewell that loved one.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're talking on Zoom, and we're in the same area, so we could meet face to face, and we have. But I know of some family members of loved ones who the funerals were held privately, and then obviously the service was streamed, which has meant that people overseas that couldn't actually attend and would never have been able to attend, even in normal circumstances outside of COVID, were able to still pay their respects. So I think although it was a really tough situation and a hard couple of years that we've gone through, it's actually in an ironic way, even though we were less connected, we've actually become more connected as well, which is interesting.
It's made us rethink the way we do things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just made us rethink everything.
Yeah. So I know at the start you spoke about your background in customer service. Can you give me some examples of how you work and how you operate, and how that might be slightly different to some of the bigger companies where maybe the staff are older or have less experience in other areas of life as you do?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Look, every funeral home is obviously different and will have its own personal components to it. The way I feel that we're a small family-run service. We don't have call centres answering calls and taking messages. And when I say personalised, I mean personalised. So it's me answering the phone. It's me attending the arrangement, and it is myself and my team that are at the service itself. So it's that continuity of care that I feel is so important. So instead of that family member repeating their story many times, I know who they are. I know who their family and their siblings and the other parent may be. And we're able to connect, I guess, on a different level. And that's what's so important for me, is to be able to have that connection with the family from the beginning and then all the way through to the end, and even after the service on occasion. And that's what most families are so grateful for, is that we take that time.
Yeah. That's lovely. And I think that connection is what people really crave anyway, but obviously especially at a time that is this challenging. I'm going to ask you some questions that people probably want to ask but never do, because they don't have the opportunity to ask.
Okay.
So actually, let me ask you first, what question do you get asked most? Obviously,
what question do I get asked most?
Obviously how you got into this, but in a situation where you're helping someone plan and organize a funeral, are there those kind of common questions that come up that you wish people kind of knew the answers to already?
Yes. One question I get let me start that again. A question that I often get asked is, how do I know that you're only going to cremate my loved one one person at a time, and that I won't get the ashes of a stranger? And what I can say is that there's very strict regulations in place at crematoriums to ensure that the process is followed to the T. And what that means is, legally, there's only one deceased that is to enter the cremator at one time. That cremation process does take quite a number of hours, to be honest with you. And then at the conclusion, that the ashes are processed accordingly, labelled, and that's how we can ensure that there's no, I guess, cross-contamination of different ashes.
That's a great question to have answered. And like I said, these are the things that people probably want to ask, but either wait till that situation or don't want to, because it's it's taboo and it's I can't ask that. So I'm just thinking about any others. I'm sure there's lots. Can you tell me, let's actually talk about the process, if that's all right, and if there's anything that you, as I said before, if there's anything you don't want to answer, that's absolutely fine. But say a loved one passes in hospital, at what point do you become involved?
So generally the family would have a conversation amongst themselves about what happens next and who they plan to, I guess, make their funeral arrangements with. Then the family would make contact with me. So generally it may be just prior to somebody passing, if somebody does know what's going to happen, or in other circumstances it might be quite sudden or unexpected, and then it may be a couple of days after somebody has died. And that's when they will call us and generally ask us about our services, where we're located, how we can help them, what our pricing is, and I guess if they're feeling comfortable, and once they've got the information that they need and can make an informed decision, then we will then make a time to meet with the family and go through the arrangements for the funeral service.
Yeah. And then is the body then collected from the hospital, or like what's the next step from there?
So it does depend on what the family is wishing to do. So for a direct cremation is when there is no funeral service.
Okay.
So if it is a direct cremation only, most contact is made over the phone and via email. And what we would do is we would send a form to the family called a transfer authority form. And this allows us as a funeral director to have permission to bring their loved one into our care. Okay, so once that document has been signed, then our transfer team are able to go to the hospital, bring the deceased into our mortuary care, and then we would then make the necessary preparations for the next step, which would be for cremation to take place. If, however, it is for a service and maybe a burial or a service and cremation, we would generally meet with the family and go through all the paperwork together. They would sign that document off, and then we would make arrangements to bring their loved one into our care. It just makes more sense that way, to be able to have that connection with them at that point.
Yeah. Working in aged care, it amazes me how the process of dealing with someone dying is dealt with from facility to facility. And it's a conversation that pops up a lot. In some facilities, the residents will form a guard of honor, and actually farewell their friend. But there's other places that I know of that it almost happens under the cover of night and no one knows, and it's kind of like the residents are like, where's Peter gone? And it's not spoken about. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's many. They do vary quite significantly. There's some aged care facilities where the family comes in and they spend a couple of hours. They may even bathe their loved one and dress them and do that sort of thing. And then there are other facilities, maybe they don't have enough staff or the equipment required to do that. I'm not sure, but they'll go back into the back area of the facility, waiting for the transport team basically to usher them out. Which way is right or wrong? There's no answer I can give with that. It's just each facility to their own. But I think it is really lovely when they have an opportunity for people to say goodbye to them. The residents, obviously, they've built a connection themselves with that person, and they can say goodbye properly. That's lovely.
Yeah. I guess it gets challenging when you are obviously dealing with people with things like dementia. And I remember my nan losing a friend, and she would forget that her friend had died and then would need to be reminded. And then it was almost like every time she was told was the first time, and she'd have to go through that initial grieving period again. So I guess there's a little bit of that comes into play as well, as it's like, we can't be explaining to 30 people multiple times what's happened. So, and they are the conversations that need to be had, because they're relevant and they're an important part of the whole process. And, generally people that are going into an aged care facility are going there because it's that stage of their life, and that's probably the last place that they're going to live before they die. So it's definitely something that needs to be thought about, and I guess asked by families and loved ones when they are choosing where their loved one's going to go, is like, actually, what do they want? Do they want the guard of honor? Because that might not be what they want as a family and as an individual. There might be those people that are like, just take me out the back. And then there'll be the others like me that'll be like, no, I want the whole fanfare.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know what? It also helps the grieving process of the residents. So even if they are suffering from dementia, then if they say, where did Joan go? You could say, remember, we had the guard of honor for her. Remember, that was the other day. And I know that, every patient will be experiencing dementia in their own degree, I guess, but there will be components that may come back.
So we've talked about a couple of the questions that you get asked. That was the most common one. Are there any other questions?
Another question I get asked is, why do I need a coffin? So particularly for a direct cremation where there's no service, why do I have to pay for a coffin? It's a legitimate question. There are costs involved, and if I'm just going straight to the mortuary and straight to the crematorium, what's the purpose of it? And again, this is actually a New South Wales health requirement where each person does need to be in a coffin for cremation to take place. So they can't be just in a body bag or wrapped in a muslin or anything like that. They do have to be in a coffin, and that's a requirement that needs to be followed and adhered to by all crematoriums.
That's fair enough. And I guess it is a legitimate question. If that's a significant cost as well, it would, and finances are an issue for people. That's I would never have thought of asking that.
I think it's more that, they just want the most minimalist option. They just say, I just want you to pick me up and take me to the crematorium. But there is steps in between that are required. One of those steps is going into a coffin. And, some of the other steps do involve additional paperwork that can sometimes be forgotten about. That's just the processing from our side that isn't always needed to be explained in full detail, I guess, to families.
Any other questions?
Oh gosh, nothing else that's coming to mind. I'll think about them when I finish. I'm sure.
It's all right. We'll do another one. Do you have much interaction with people planning and organising their own funerals or memorials, or is it generally after the person has died with the family?
That's a good question, actually. It is most frequently after somebody has passed. However, I do have some families who know that they are unwell, maybe with some form of terminal cancer or something like that. And they've, I guess, come to terms with what's happening. And they're able to have those open conversations. So I have met with some people, either the family members who are doing it on their behalf, or I've even met with some of the persons who are unwell and those arrangements themselves. It is challenging. The way that you sit with the family and discuss the needs changes depending on the situation. So obviously being very mindful of how you're wording everything. But they've always been really grateful for the information that's been provided. So they have a better understanding of what happens next.
Do you think it would make it easier if that was more common for the families?
I do. I feel like when somebody dies, there's generally a time frame anywhere between 3 and 10 days that a funeral can take place. And in that time, even though a funeral director is there to help and support and guide you through that whole process, there's still a number of, I guess, tasks that a family member still needs to do or assist with for the funeral to take place. And it can be really overwhelming for people. It can be something as simple as organising maybe some photos or some music, or meeting with a celebrant to talk about, their loved one's life, putting a eulogy together, talking to the family, who's coming, where are we going, who can make it, who can't make it. Are we having live streaming? Are we not having live streaming? There's all these question marks. And when somebody dies, sometimes the last thing you want to do is start planning an event like this. And it's the type of event that occurs in life. So having some of those question marks, I guess, organised ahead of time, that can really alleviate a lot of those responsibilities when somebody passes, and you can just be and you can grieve. So what sometimes happens is we go on to auto drive, and you keep doing things and activities and meeting me, and dropping off clothing and doing all of these tasks, and your mind stays so active. So when the funeral comes, it's the day, it becomes really overwhelming and you start to slow down and the grief then sets in.
Yeah.
So it's almost delaying grief until the funeral service. Whereas some people who have made those smaller preparations in advance can begin the grieving process when the death actually occurs.
Yeah. I was just thinking it would be interesting if that process was kind of, we plan our wedding, right? We grow up thinking about, my wedding day is going to be X, Y, Z. May not always work out afterwards. But wouldn't it be interesting if that was something that we actually spoke about, maybe not at school, but as part of our education process of, there are events throughout your life that you're going to plan for. We think my daughter at the moment is doing work experience and thinking about what she actually wants to do with her life. It would be interesting if we talked about dying and funerals and memorials at a much younger age. How different we would feel about death.
Yes, I feel like obviously our wishes and our needs change over time, obviously. But just having, I guess, an understanding of, what does happen and not make it quite so taboo. Talking about death and dying, because just like growing up, it is part of life, the end of life, if you will. But it also is a way to celebrate life. So instead of it being, I guess, and this will be changed depending on circumstance. So obviously, please being mindful of, an accident or something like that is a very different type of scenario to deal with. Or death of a child or a young person or something like that. What I guess we're talking about today is more those who have lived a full life. And know that, that it may be nearing. I actually had a phone call from a gentleman the other day, and his mother is 110. So he's been given a call to say that, she isn't well. And 110, I think that is just amazing.
Wow.
What a life. Imagine all the things he's seen in that time. So he's making his, these plans in advance because he does know that her health is starting to deteriorate.
Well, I don't imagine he's probably in his 70s or 80s as well.
I think he's actually in his late 80s, to be honest with you. So, that's incredible. Of someone who's, making some plans in advance.
Yeah, wow. I had talking about, I guess we say that we want it to be a celebration of our life, a funeral or a memorial, and what you said just now about, obviously we are talking specifically today about, death coming at the end of a full life, not of a child or an accident, because I think those situations are very different to what we're talking about today. But I had a lady who came to one of my retirement village classes, and she just loved dancing. And as she was approaching the end of her life and she was palliative, her niece rang me and said, she didn't have any children. Her niece called and said, Arnie would really like her Zumba ladies to dance at her funeral. So, and they had sat and talked a lot about how she wanted the funeral to be, which song she wanted. So I then went to the ladies and said, this is what she has asked for. If you feel comfortable, that would be amazing. If you don't feel comfortable, that's perfectly fine too. And at the end of the service, the celebrant kind of called us up, and I just explained that this was what she'd asked for. And the group of 5 or 6 ladies got up, and I said, if you feel inclined to clap or tap your toes or to stand up and dance, that is what she would like. But also, mindful of the fact that if you need to pay your respects by not doing that it's, that's perfectly fine as well. And she chose to have Great Balls of Fire as her song that we danced to, which was she was very, very cheeky. And everyone stood up and kind of, some danced, some tapped their toes, some clapped. But on the way leaving the chapel, half a dozen people came up to me and said that's exactly that's what she would have wanted. So it was really nice that she was able to express those wishes and kind of have that celebration, albeit a sad one, but be able to celebrate in the way that she wanted.
Agreed. And I think that's so important. It's paying respects to that person and keeping that memory alive, and that's the part of grieving that sometimes people can forget in the early stages because it's so overwhelming. But keeping that memory alive by talking about, the dancing, or talking about her love of music, or whatever it might be, that's what we need to remember.
Yeah. And emotions kick in, and families can be particularly volatile in these situations as well. So I think, like you said before, you kind of go into autopilot for that period of time initially. And I think people's personalities tend to kick in and be exaggerated as well. So if you've got someone that is the organizer, that will be where they find their comfort in organizing. But then other people might step back and not speak up where they actually would really like to have to be able to express their thoughts and their wishes as well. So it's, all of that kicks in, I guess.
And leveraging off that too, Emma, is that if somebody actually puts in writing or has a conversation that I really want, Kylie Minogue playing at my funeral, the family members are less likely to disagree with it because it's been the wish that has been communicated. Whereas if it's unknown, that's when there's more likely to be, I guess, question marks or disagreements or that type of thing.
Question for you personally is, obviously you love what you do, and you know that you are making a difference, and your love of caring for people during this time is what inspires you. There must just be days that you just are overwhelmed or exhausted or emotionally drained because you're dealing with a difficult time in people's lives, and then you are also, if you're meeting with families who may be finding it hard to communicate, you're dealing with, taking on their energies and managing their expectations as well. How do you manage that from a personal point of view and as a mum as well?
Look, it's a good question. I feel that when I'm meeting with a family, when I'm speaking to a family, I need to give them my everything because they need that support right now. So yes, there are days where I'm tired or I'm exhausted and I just need a bit of quiet time, and I think that's quite normal. There's been times where a couple of months ago I had, unfortunately, a couple of stillborn babies that I was looking after, and that was probably the hardest situation that I had been in probably in my life. So looking after those mums and those parents and being there with them, and you kind of come home and you're grateful for what you have, and you're also quite honoured to be able to be there, and they felt a connection with you, with me for that time, and they felt comfortable, and I just have to be there, and I just have to do what I have to do to get them through this hard time, and this is only the beginning for them. So whatever I can do to help and support them, I will do. And then when I get home, I guess it's just that quiet time for me to be able to be with myself and my family, and just know that I'm helping.
Yeah. Is there a support system for people that do the work that you do? Like, are there this is probably a really random question, but are there support groups for funeral directors?
Look, not that I know of. I feel that as a funeral director, you generally gravitate towards other people in the industry to, I guess, what's the word? to talk about things that are going on, and it makes you feel, I guess, a little bit more at ease that they have also been in maybe similar situations, and you're able to, talk that through together. Having support systems at home, like, family members to talk to about your day and that type of thing is obviously also important to be able to, for you as a person, to be able to be okay and keep going day in and day out, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with high emotions every single day, and being able to handle yourself in a professional way and also a compassionate way is so important.
Yeah. We will wrap it up, but before we do, I just wanted to ask, like, for your, I guess, your top tip or your best piece of advice for, for anyone listening, and this, it might be for the people that aren't even thinking about needing to think about funerals or aren't in that situation right now, or it may be someone that is imminently facing the loss of a loved one. So I guess, any advice that you can give, whether it's one or two or three pieces of advice.
One piece of advice I would give is take your time and do your research about who you decide to facilitate the funeral for you. There's so many wonderful providers out there that all have different specialties and expertise, and you have to feel comfortable with who you choose. So that's why I guess having the conversation ahead of time can allow you to make those inquiries or make those phone calls and see who you feel best connected with. I'm by no means going to stand here and, advertise myself, but the way that I do talk to families is you need to feel comfortable with who you're talking to. So if that means making a couple of phone calls before you make a decision, that's always a really good thing to do. Another tip would be, some people don't feel comfortable with actually organising a prepaid funeral. They have concerns or worries about what that means, or, what happens if I don't die for 10, 15 years. Respect that 100%. And another option is pre-arranging. So what that means is putting your wishes down in writing. So you don't have to, put it all in writing and then pay for it and have it all locked and sealed in a contract. That is one option. But if you don't feel comfortable with that option, pre-arranging means still having those discussions, whether it be with your family, your loved ones, a funeral director, whoever it may be, and just documenting. Just like you document information in your will, it's information about your wishes for your end of life. So I guess it's all about starting the conversation when you feel comfortable, being able to do that, and just being honest with those that you love, what your wishes are, however interesting they may be.
If it's documented, like how legal does that document have to be? Does it have to be registered with a funeral director or with a solicitor, or when you do your will? Like, legally, what are the implications?
Look, to be honest with you, most people don't look at the will until after the funeral. So what I recommend to people who are wishing to note down their wishes is, I say, have it with your will, but you need to tell your next of kin that it is there. So it's not a surprise. And, the funeral takes place and cremation takes place, and then they go find the will, and then they realize that they really wanted to be buried because they had a plot in a local cemetery. So it's important to document it, but it's also important to advise your next of kin, or maybe even to, immediate family members of where this document is located, and show it to them. It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be something that they find and it's completely, foreign to them. It should be, oh, that's right, that's where, mum or dad or nan, put it, and they did mention it to us, so we better get that out and have another look over what they wanted to do.
Yeah, that's great advice. That would be awful to find out afterwards.
Yes. It sure would be.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to share that we haven't touched on?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me along today, and it's been so wonderful to be able to connect with you, Emma. I do feel that we've got many similarities both in work and in life, and it's nice to be able to chat to someone openly about this important information. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I will be sharing on the show notes, but where can we find you if we want more information? Social media, website?
Yeah, sure. So we have, our website is personalfarewells.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me personally on LinkedIn as well.
Beautiful. Is it, here's a random question, probably more business related, but
Sure.
when you're working in the industry that you're in, how do you find, like using social media?
Yeah, look, I feel that we just have to be so mindful of how we're communicating our message on social media. There's lots of wonderful companies that we try to, I guess, connect with, such as end of life doulas, which is something maybe we could chat about on another podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
Keepsake memorial items, urns, all the different options that are available. Sometimes people don't even know, that you can have a little bit of ash cremated remains in some jewelry items, or glass, or post it overseas to your loved ones, or scattering tubes. There's just all of these possibilities these days. That's what we try to make a focus on social media, is information based. So people can be informed. Yeah,
that's great. Well, thank you again for your time. We will be sharing this, and we're obviously sharing links to your how do people contact you, and thank you for the work you do, and for the amazing way that you carry yourself and connect with people, because I think it makes a huge difference. And I can imagine it's an industry that can become very cookie cutter. So I think it's really beautiful to obviously connect with someone that's doing things a little differently. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma.
Brilliant. Thank you.